The Supreme Court is all set to resume hearing of the Gyan Vapi Mosque case at 3 p.m. today. On Thursday, the Apex Court stayed the hearing in the Varanasi court. The move came from the top court amid fears of the Muslim side that the Wazukhana, where an alleged shivling was found, could be razed following the order by the Varanasi court to seal the area. Now, 2 survey reports have been submitted in the Varanasi court, which mention an oval-shaped shivling structure in the Gyan Vapi Mosque complex. Survey reports also reveal a conical structure under the mosque dome, 4 idols in crimson color, temple ruins and images of deities. The survey report submitted before the Varanasi court mentions a shivling of 2.5 feet in height. The report says the depth of the shivling is 63 centimeters and the base circumference is about 4 feet. Meanwhile, the Allahabad High Court will resume hearing the case, which was filed 31 years ago in 1991 in the District Court of Varanasi. The council appearing on behalf of the temple argued that the property in dispute was not a Waqf property and the provisions of the Waqf Act were not applicable here. My colleague Anisha Mathur is now joining me live from Delhi on this. Anisha, good morning to you. What is expected in the Supreme Court today?
Inform me in the Supreme Court at 3 p.m. once the bench takes up this matter. What will be crucial to watch is the stand taken by the UP government as well as the Hindu petitioners with regard to the plea by the Muslim side. And also, we'll have to wait and see what the Supreme Court will say about the apprehensions expressed by the Muslim petitioners regarding the ongoing proceedings in the civil court. Because remember, the Muslim petitioners have very clearly sought a stay on what is going on in the Varanasi civil court. They said that any proceedings that are going on could lead to a change in the religious character of this entire premises, that there is an attempt to sort of obstruct the premises, there is an attempt to change or demolish certain areas in the premises, which is why they have called for an urgent hearing in the matter. They called for a stay on the proceedings. Now, if you see what has happened so far, the state of UP has so far not filed any written submissions before the Supreme Court clarifying their stand. We're expecting those to be filed before the hearing today. On the other side, of course, the Hindu petitioners have filed an interim application seeking permission from the court to submit a large number of documentation, historical evidence, medieval texts, etc., which indicate that the temple existed prior to the construction of the mosque structure. In fact, I beg your pardon. In fact, the Hindu petitioners in their application have claimed that the Places of Worship Act and the Waqf Act will not apply to this particular premises because this was always a temple and therefore the right of the Hindus to worship unhindered at this site should be restored and this encroachment should be removed. Now, whether or not the Supreme Court accepts that argument remains to be seen. Of course, the Muslim petitioners have opposed these arguments in the civil court, in the High Court, and now again in the Supreme Court, saying that there is no legal basis for raising these arguments, that the 1991 Places of Worship Act bars such petitions from being filed. So it will be very crucial to see what stand is taken in the court by various sides and more importantly, whether the Supreme Court chooses to pass any detailed orders today or not. Because remember, today is also the last day before the Supreme Court breaks for vacation. If there is no order passed from the Apex Court today, then the petitioners will have to request for a special hearing during the summer vacation.
Does not act immediately, these shortages will continue for decades. The scale of the problem is immense and no country can fix it alone. So what's causing these shortages? As the world remains caught in multiple wars, our food supply is being weaponized. Is someone holding the world hostage by hoarding grains? The United States is pointing fingers at Russia. The Americans are blaming Vladimir Putin for the shortages. They say the Russian invasion of Ukraine has disrupted food supply chains, and now Russia wants to starve the world to win the war. Listen to what the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said.
The consequences of these actions have been devastating. The food supply for millions of Ukrainians and millions more around the world has quite literally been held hostage by the Russian military. The Russian government seems to believe that using food as a weapon will help accomplish what its invasion has not, to break the spirit of the Ukrainian people.
Now, that's a big charge. Antony Blinken made that statement at a special session of the United Nations Security Council, the UNSC. They were discussing the global food shortages. America's charge is quite clear. They say there's enough food in the world, but it's not reaching those who need it because Russia will not allow it. Does this case hold water? Is Russia indeed using food as a weapon? Who is hoarding the world's food? On Gravitas tonight, that's what we'll discuss. We'll start with examining America's allegations. They say the Russian military is holding the world's food supply. How? By blocking food consignments at ports. That's America's accusation. Russian forces have blockaded Ukrainian shipping ports, and these are not empty ports. About 28 million tons of grain is stuck there in Ukraine. And that's enough to feed millions of people around the world. Ukraine grows enough food to feed 400 million people every year. With Russia, it supplies 30% of the world's wheat. And now this stock has vanished from the global markets. Reports say 50 million people around the world are waiting for supplies. If the exports do not resume, they will all starve. The United States is demanding that Russia lift the blockade. They're not alone in making this demand. The G7 too is blaming Russia. They say Russia's actions have raised the risk of a hunger crisis. So what is Moscow's response? Well, they're hitting back at the West. Russia is blaming Western sanctions for disrupting food supplies.
But after the 24th of February, what we saw was an absolute bacchanal against our country alone. Today, so far in total, there are more than 10,000 sanctions. The result of this is that transport routes have been cut off. There is a logistical crisis. There are threats to Russian ships and they can't get out of ports. There is also a problem with freight and insurance, limits on international commercial accounts. This isn't even a full list.
What seems to be certain is that if you have a poll on the border now, it would not be to set up a United Ireland immediately. Much as many people, myself included, would like to see a United Ireland. It's interesting that in the south of Ireland, in the independent part of the island, while most people will say, yes, we want a United Ireland, the large majority, there always have been, when you frame the question in a different way, and you say, for example, well, would you want a United Ireland if your taxes were going to be increased substantially? Then the answer is no, we don't want to unite. We're not willing to pay that price for a United Ireland. If you say, do you want a United Ireland, despite the likelihood of this being transition being marked by violence, which is going to affect your life, then the majority of people say, no, we don't want to pay that price for a United Ireland. So it's very difficult to give a straight answer. I don't think there is a straight answer to the question of whether a majority of people in Southern Ireland want or don't want a United Ireland. In the North, of course, things are more complicated still, that well, the majority of nationalists, of course, want United Ireland, and nationalists are now marginally sort of the bigger community. The fact is that the Catholics in the North and nationalists in the North have never voted for a violent route towards a United Ireland. Sinn Féin made advances in the North, beginning when the IRA called a ceasefire. They didn't, Sinn Féin never commanded a majority support among the Catholics of Northern Ireland when the IRA campaign was continuing. So all these things have got to be factored in, and it will be a foolhardy person who claimed to know or even to be terribly confident about how it was all going to work out. And if I may just say a word about the loyalist community, the advocates of violence to defend the North, to defend the northern state as part of the United Kingdom, they are few and far between. Only tiny numbers, and particularly without being patronising, sort of the people in the lowest echelons of society, or if you like, the poorest people among the Protestants, they tend to have a strident and obdurate opposition to a United Ireland. Their attachment to Britain is great. That's a tiny number. But it is also the case that not a single elected representative of the Unionist community, not one, supported the Northern Ireland Protocol in the recent elections. And